Person. The price of some forms of alternate electricity generation is coming down, capital cost, solar PV, for instance, significantly, according to some media reports, in the next 5 years or so. If we have a 10-year deal with WELL Networks, is that not going to work against us, maybe being cost effective in a handful of years' time to generate our own electricity, given the large size of the wastewater treatment plant site and potential places you could put solar PV cells?
There's a couple of responses to that question. So the first one is we're very interested in those other options, and we're about to enter into another arrangement to investigate energy recovery within the plant, which will include a whole raft of different assessments just to use what we've got before we have to buy energy in. And so that piece of work's about to kick off, and we'll have the outputs towards the end of this financial year. And it may be that we come back to council for some decisions on implementation or what are the options come out of that process. The other key part to answer the question for me is about resilience and redundancy. So it's a critical plant. It uses a lot of energy. In my view, it's very important to be able to run the plant to the extent we're able to on any energy source. So what that means in my mind is we have the ability to run the plant 100% on electricity at any time, 100% on gas at any time, 100% on whatever else. If any network was to suddenly become unavailable, we've got options. So the arrangement we're proposing with WELL is simply to use their infrastructure, and if we use it, we pay for the wear and tear cost, but there's no obligation to use it.
So we could generate 100% of our own inside the precinct, and we wouldn't cost us anything from WELL?
Not quite, because the WELL infrastructure is inside our plant. So if we generated it on one end of the site to use it on the other end of the site, we would be using WELL infrastructure to move it around within our site. So we would pay for that, the use of that asset, but in principle, we would be managing our costs because we wouldn't be using the reticulation out beyond the gate and out on the broader network.
Yeah, so how come it's their gear in our site? Isn't it the normal arrangement that you have to install and own the power distribution system and hardware within your own premises?
The reality at present at the wastewater treatment plant site is that WELL Energy own all 11 kV infrastructure, and that suits us as an operator because it's a very specialist field and there's some significant safety dimensions to working on that infrastructure. So part of this arrangement is regular maintenance and scheduled maintenance and compliance regulation, including any changes in regulation. So for us, we'd rather be experts in wastewater treatment, not wastewater treatment and electricity and other things. So from an operator perspective, it's actually quite helpful to have WELL own that infrastructure.
The key being the 11 kV, that's high-end electrical cabling.
Sure, thanks. Thank you. Councillor Mallett?
Just on that, the internal wiring, which is what you were just talking about, Dave, that would be required irrespective of where you're getting the power from. So whether it's coming from hydro, solar, you're going to need to move stuff around the facility.
That's correct, yes.
Further questions? All right, let's move the recommendation. I'd like to move the recommendation.
Just, I do have a question, sorry.
Oh, you did, sorry, I thought your hand... Yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, just can you confirm that under the CCO model, this discussion would not happen in this chamber in open session?
It would depend on how the CCO was set up. I don't think we can answer that. depend how you set the CCO.
So it would depend on the constitution whether it was open or closed.
And the shareholder agreement
Right,
and
okay,
the memorandum
that's good.
of
No,
understanding.
because,
Yep.
you know, these are good practical
Oh,
examples
yep.
of things that are coming to this chamber now, and that's, I'm not being negative. This is just a good practical example of, at the moment, this is an issue of reasonable public interest. And if you move to a CCO, then obviously I think these are good examples to reflect on as to how you would want your CCO board to conduct its business in an open session or have appropriate public interface.
But it definitely wouldn't happen within this chamber, would it? Your dependent answer referred to whether it was an open or not. I mean, it would be. You're not suggesting the CCO would operate from this chamber.
It would be highly unlikely, in my opinion, but it depends how you wanted to constitute the CCO.
Thanks. It's a good defence.
So we've got a mover, which is me, for the recommendation from management, and Councillor Mallet as a seconder. Is there any discussion on the motion? There being none, those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Next item is the IS programme of work, the quarterly update. Take the report as read. David, you have any?
Page number,
172? It's page 172. Yeah. Any comments to make, David?
No, none for me.
Any questions of David? All right, well, I'll move that the report be received. I have a seconder for that, please. Thank you, Councillor Tooman. Any discussion on the motion that the report be received? There being none, those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 14, the multi-year grant follow-up report. Thanks, Lance.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Look, I'll take the report as read. We were asked to come back and with a way forward with the discussion which happened previously around the approval for the multi-year grants by the Allocation Committee, and Age Concern unfortunately didn't get their application in time, so I won't labour the options. They're reasonably straightforward. Option one is a reasonably grim option for Age Concern, is that we don't endorse their proposal for funding. Option two, you could utilise the unallocated $32,000 from the multi-year grant. Council does have the ability to, in extraordinary circumstances and by resolution, to make a decision outside of a council policy, so this would go against a council policy. And there's some risks around that, about setting a precedent and compromising the integrity of the policy. Option three, which we've explained in the report that separate to the grants, we actually have a service level agreement with Age Concern to actually pretty much operate the Celebrating Age Centre that we used to have staff doing. So that's one of the efficiencies that we've looked at and carried out a restructuring, which is outlined in the report above in number 14.14. So what we're suggesting here is that the option three is extending the service level agreement because of the circumstances that have arisen. Have two parts to that, so for the running of the centre, and then the second part of that is to actually fund them for the $30,000, which since the last meeting, and I think you asked for it, Mr. Chairman, was that we've actually got a proposal from Age Concern, which outlines that it's really around paying the costs involved with a staff member delivering education and lifelong learning programs. So we're suggesting that there's a second part to that service level agreement so that we can resolve this situation. This probably sets less of a precedent than what option two would, but it does mean that we would have to put it onto the risks and opportunities list to the Finance Committee and look for that money for this financial year and the 2 years after this. I'm happy to leave it there, answer any questions, and I've got Andy and Kylie who deal in more detail with the aged concerned people than I do. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I've got questions from Councillor Mallett and then Deputy Mayor Chesterman.
Thanks, Lance. So by going with option 3, we, as opposed to option 2, rather than saying this is a grant which we're giving you with, and I'll use my words a bit careful, but with limited strings attached, it's a gift. We're going to now say, you do this work for us. It's like a contractual, they're effectively becoming a contractor to us, aren't they, for this work? So we have more control over the quality of the service, etc.
That's correct. So there'll be the two parts. So the 26,000 would be just staffing the reception area and what they do down there now under the current
That's
arrangement.
existing,
Yeah. The 30,000 would be essentially what they would have got in a grant if they put an application in time and the allocation committee had said yes. But we will word that in the service level agreement that's what we're requiring them to do. We used to have similar type of arrangements through our previous policies and funding arrangements until we went through the whole review. So it's really a halfway house to actually resolve this situation without compromising the integrity of the policy.
So what in effect we're doing, so presumably in the past we used to fund them for doing this sort of work, and because we thought it was something that council should be doing, but we've got a contractor who can do it better for various reasons, we then decided that we would get out of that business. I'm just
Yep.
nod your head if I'm close.
Yep.
And then they were in the process of asking for that money by way of a grant. They missed the timing. There's now an opportunity for so council's effectively getting back into the business of doing this sort of work and saying, but we won't do it ourselves. We'll get it's a responsibility of council, but we'll get you guys to do the work on our behalf. That's how we're packaging this.
We would for the first bit. The second bit would be just extending a service level agreement in lieu of what a grant would have been. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that explains it clearly enough.
I'm just wondering, I guess I'm just thinking,
Because with the grants, we do actually have a set criteria. So when groups apply for that, then we are actually saying that we endorse what they're doing in the community and that sort of thing, although they come to us with a proposal within that criteria rather than us actually specifying exactly what needs to happen. So
it sort of changes the flavour of the thing you're trying to get
Yes.
done, and it
Yeah.
creates almost a responsibility that we're taking responsibility for some activity. Well, perhaps it could look like we are agreeing that this is something that a council should be involved in, to the extent we've got a contractor to do it, as opposed to giving it to a group who are doing good things for the community with a lesser governance responsibility on council's behalf.
Yes, and the reason why we've structured it like this is because and correct me if I'm wrong, and councillors might do that, is that was the flavour we got from the discussion at the previous committee meeting, that councillors generally endorsed the work that aged concerned people do.
No, I think you've got quite a good answer to the task you were given. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Chesterman.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Look, just help me understand. At the start, Age Concern did not make the application for what, 48,000, or was it 45?
Well, we weren't sure what they were going to apply for, so yeah.
Okay, so the question then becomes in option 3, and Councillor Mallett canvassed some of that. If we were to, and if I was to move option 3, would that mean that Age Concerns in the same position as if they had submitted their application within the deadline?
Yes, because we've now, as Councillor Pascoe suggested that last time, we were really speaking in a bit of a void about actually knowing what exactly their proposal was. We were making a whole bunch of assumptions on the historically what had happened there. So really what we wanted clarity was what were they asking council for. So they've come back and said their proposal is $30,000 for the education and lifelong learning program. So
if option 3, I was to put that forward as a resolution,
they are comfortable with that.
they are comfortable
Yes, that's correct.
with that. And that, and I was picking up on Councillor Mallett's point, are we creating a rod for our back on doing it this way Or should we just simply say, well, if council agrees, we will just accept the 48,000, whatever the amount is, and we will just pay that grant? Are we creating another precedent in the way option 3 is being proposed?
I don't think we've got, apart from option 1, you've got no options where you don't set some sort of a precedent.
Okay.
I think option 3, and this may not be the right terminology, sets less of a precedent because of the one-off circumstances which have occurred. And I think from the learnings from all of this, then when we go through this process in a few years' time, then we will use those learnings to hopefully ensure that this doesn't happen again.
Okay.
We don't have people who forget to put in an application actually coming to us late.
Okay. I'd just like to signal, Chair, that I'm, when you're ready.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I've got a question from Councillor Forsyth.
It wasn't a question. I was going to move the motion, but if Councillor Chesterman's going to, I'm happy to second it.
Okay, and I've got a question from Councillor York.
I just want to know, besides age concern, is there any other service level agreement with similar case? Because I know the SLA they have is the managing the celebrating age centre. Is there any other organisation doing something similar?
My understanding there isn't. There's only one other thing which has only just come to light in the past few days is it's not through this process, through the grants process, it's actually through the annual plan process, Surf Life Saving, or through the LTP process, and I know Councillor Chesterman was involved going away talking to other councils in the Merrill Forum about how Surf Life Saving actually funded, from councils within the Waikato region. They've told us that they felt that they put in a submission to the LTP electronically. We can't find that, but now they're coming back to us saying that they did do that, and they've got an issue because they were asking for a certain sum of money through the LTP. They were quite clear that they wouldn't be applying through this multi-year grant. So that's something else that we're having those discussions with them, getting further clarity, and then we can come back to council on that if they want to pursue that further.
So if we go ahead with option 3, that means there will be no other organisation coming to us for the same thing, right? No.
I would hope not. I can't say I would be 100% certain on that, but it's not, to our knowledge, no, there wouldn't be.
Thanks.
Councillor King.
It was really clear when on the last report that they had been receiving grants and hadn't received one on this round. Did staff pick up on that?
Well, we right when we changed the policy, we let people know that we had significant interaction with them, and at the end of the day, when all the applications came in, then Andy and his team put that to the allocation committee, and theirs wasn't there. So by that time, it was too late. I think a learning from this would be to check the applications that come through the electronic system, maybe a day before they all close, and then look at is there any or ask the question if X organisation who's been interested in being funded before or has been funded, then why haven't they applied? So I think that's a learning from this.
Sorry to interrupt, but I thought we did follow up on them. So I'm just looking at Andy behind you. Sorry, Lance. I thought there was follow up prior to the application process closing. Yes, following up to let them know. Yeah.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you could actually probably have a few more stages in that. I think the question is how much chasing does council do? And I don't have an opinion on that, but other organisations, Trust Waikato, etc. Probably the differences with them, they do have a pretty hard and fast cut-off date, but they do actually have different application rounds, more than what we do. So if people do miss out, then they can actually go to those later in the year.
Thank you. A question?
Just a general question following on from that. How do we advertise when the fundings for various streams open?
I'll have to ask Andy that.
Through the chair, we use a variety of means. So we do public notices in the print media. We also use our social media and our websites to promote the fact that it's got grants open. Where we've got previous grant recipients, we do also do the electronic email to say this grant was open. So we use a few different streams.
So,
And also the one other thing, Andy, is the community advisors too who are out in the community. Obviously word of mouth too.
thanks.
Can I
Councillor Toomey?
How long did they have to, how long was it open for them to put an application in? What period of time?
The multi-year grant was open for 1 calendar month.
1 month. And did we actually contact them to say, hey, where's your application?
The staff member who was our funding advisor is no longer with council.
Okay.
I had a conversation with her because she did bring up to the attention halfway through the process that 2 of our existing groups had not put an application in yet, and I said, can you please follow them up? The other one did put in an application thereafter, so I trust that she did follow up.
Okay. So that part's uncertain now, is it?
I
With the
wasn't
HCC,
CC'd into
yeah.
the email.
She's actually in Southeast Asia and we can't get hold of her. So.
Okay.
Councillor King, you got another question?
So, when we became aware that they hadn't put an application in, were any elected members made aware of this situation?
No, because we've got a process around the allocation committee. I'm not sure why we'd do that.
So, who's the multi-year community external allocation committee? Who is that?
There's 2 elected members on that,
Who are they?
Councillor Gallagher and Councillor Young.
So, were they made aware that in previous years?
Yes.
Well, I'm
Yes.
happy to answer. We were
The second
extremely aware on the panel,
Yeah.
and there was quite a degree of discussion, but all panellists, particularly the non-councillor panellists, were very aware of processes with other agencies they're involved with, and we were in a situation of no option in terms of, the perception of the integrity of the process, and it was our understanding that Age Concern had been genuine attempts had been made to contact them, and the panellists, including the 2 councillors on that, were crystal clear that there was a huge danger of the integrity of the process, and to the extent, if we'd pushed it, we would have had panellists who would have reviewed their position because of the integrity of the process, okay? Because obviously while there's a notion it was a late application, there was no application. And even when we were discussing it, and correct me if I'm wrong, there was no application on the table. There was a report, an application hadn't arrived, but there wasn't even a late application. I can't recall even any correspondence.
But had they been told that there wasn't one wouldn't be accepted?
Can I just clarify? Age Concern have actually, they've actually said to us that they made a mistake at their end, so they're well aware of the application dates and everything like that. So I think we need to be very clear on that.
Yeah, I appreciate they made a mistake. We heard it here last week, but once we realised they were out of the loop and our old people were out in the cold, at that stage, did we start looking at another way of housing them, of funding them? Because we obviously had to go through another channel.
That was discussed, and that's
we're a
why
partnership.
I certainly anticipated that this matter essentially would be referred and we were well aware that there would be approach made to council. But I want to stress that the panel operates, if you like, under your delegation as a totally independent body without any, what I'd call, if you can use the word, political interference. And I was left in no doubt as a member of that panel that the panellists approached that simply from the fact that they hadn't received an application and that there were a large number of organisations who were being declined, because of the quantum amount of money, And I guess in the end the issue comes back to us to solve. In other words, for them to actually make an allocation for a non-existing application was beyond their brief. Couldn't do it.
So were you in such a way that you couldn't make other elected members aware of the situation at the time?
Oh, the elected members were aware in terms of when the report came back to council.
Yeah.
That was the first.
Yeah,
We knew
yeah.
last.
Yeah,
the
I mean,
last meeting.
Can we have this
Happy to,
conversation
yeah,
through the chair, please? Yeah.
sorry, I apologise. Through the chair, it's a legit question, and whether there can be earlier flags, I'll acknowledge that through the chair.
Thank you.
And
Across the bridge.
Councillor King, have you got another question?
yes, point 14, bullet point 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which one is that? 10.
Which one?
Third one.
With the community facilities review,
Total value.
when are you reporting back on that?
Before the annual plan in, is it November, Andy? Yeah, in November. So it's happening at the moment.
So does this funding lock them into that building?
No, so the $30,000 in the SLA would be for the activities. If they were in another building, then they could transfer those activities to that building. So, but the $26,000, the first part of it is for the services they provide at that building. So we'd structure it so that it's flexible around those two different circumstances.
So is it possible they could be moved out of that building?
It is possible. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but obviously there'll be the full report on the community facilities review. Will come back to council, and that'll be for consideration of council. But we're still in the infancy of that, so I wouldn't like to jump to any conclusions.
So when that building was completed in around about 1999, I think it was, did the senior citizens who were involved at the time, did they fundraise and put money into that building?
Sorry, I'd have to look into that. I wasn't here at that stage. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that is relevant to what we're discussing today.
It's in the report on 14.10, bullet point 10, where we're talking
About the building, about the celebrating age building.
Yeah, about the facility services review.
I see, okay.
Council Manager.
Yeah, so we're keeping our options open. So the $26,000 is arranging that facility. If there was some reason, whatever that may be, if they move out, then there'd be ability to for that not to continue. But the $30,000 would continue for the 3 years if they transfer their activities to some other premises.
So,
And there might be other things outside of any council decisions. There might be a natural disaster or something like that where the building's not able to be used or whatever. So I think we've got to just accommodate all the potential outcomes.
So my understanding is it's very unlikely they'd want to move out of this building. If we decided that they were to be relocated, would there be a full report put together as to the background of that building, what money went into that building, and
Yep, so there'll be...
and that will come back with your report?
Yeah, absolutely.
If they're going to be moved
Yeah.
on?
So the work we're doing there around the community facilities review, and some elected members are involved in that working group, is that they have requested all the historic information of those particular council buildings and what are all the nuances involved with that, and then obviously looking forward, if there's any discussion around doing something differently, what's the consequences of that, and then what would we need to do and work through.
Including how it was funded?
Yes, if we can find that information, yes.
Thank you.
I've got two questions. One, I think, follows on from Councillor King. The two amounts would stay separate in the service level agreement. The 26,000 would stay distinct from the 30,000 if option 3 was granted. So there would be ongoing negotiations around the renewal of the 26,000 as well as the 30,000 in terms of what's outlined there.
That's correct.
The second question is, if we did agree to option 3, would we set a bunch of KPIs and requirements for the delivery of the services expected for the $30,000 grant or payment? Would we set those in a way that they are different to what might have been the KPIs had they received the grant through the community grant system?
No, probably not. We'd probably have them similar.
Okay. So that might create a precedent.
That's correct. I said
That's the risk.
options
around-
2 and 3 both would set precedents, but we believe that option 3 would set less of a precedent, and we believe that publicly we could explain the reasons why we've entered into this.
Thank you. All right, we've covered all questions. Would somebody like to move the?
Yeah, I'm happy to move the option 3.
That is the recommendation under 11 on page 177. Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Mallett?
I thought I said I'd second it.
You want to?
It's earlier.
Yeah, earlier.
Councillor Oates.
Oh, sorry, you had signal. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, hang on.
So,
And I'd
So
like to speak to it too.
Councillor Forsyth seconded. Yes, okay. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Chesterman. Who'll speak?
Yes, thanks, Chair. This is a genuine oversight, and Age Concern recognises it failed to respond in time. They do good work, and I do understand the issue of precedent, but I also don't believe that we should be punishing Age Concern. A genuine oversight. Unfortunate, but these things do happen. And I think it is an opportunity for councillors to support the resolution, to show that we have a heart in this situation. And I think ongoing it's a matter of process, where we should be thinking about some email alerts to groups as we come to the end of the time frame for this, because clearly there was a problem. And I think that we should think about that process for groups that perhaps have an expectation. You know, why is it that someone hasn't responded? Someone's died, someone hasn't got information out of their post office box, their computers shut down, a whole host of reasons that we should just simply say, there's something wrong here, we need to do a bit more work. So I've got great pleasure in moving that resolution.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor McPherson.
Look, I support the comments of the Deputy Mayor in respect of this. It's very practical, and I think it's important to be practical in these situations. It's all very well, and I do understand the position of the two councillors on the committee, that there is an integrity in that process, but as Councillor Gallagher correctly pointed out in the second part of what he said before, once you've gone as far as you can in that part of the process, there's still the process around council that we have to consider, we as representatives of the community, and this community that we represent has for quite a number of years supported A, the Celebrating Age Centre in particular, and B, the activities that they run and that whole general area of activity we recognise with an ageing population. It's important to support that, and this is the group that provides the coordinating role in that area. And we would be foolish politically, when we come to this part of the process, not to strongly consider their needs. Now, so I almost say whatever it takes within reason to do that. And I think this is an acceptable way of solving the issue at the moment. I think longer term and future, the people in this bureaucracy in the Hamilton City Council have to realise that putting notices in newspapers, sending something out through an official channel, that doesn't necessarily cut the mustard when you're working with groups that are head down, backside up, providing service delivery out in the community. I I'm not surprised this happened when we changed the policy and just put it into a sort of a general application format like other organisations have, that some people have slipped through the cracks, and we hear Surf Lifesaving may have as well, and I want to come back to that later on. I think that our bureaucracy, especially those working with the community service delivery organisations out in the community, need to go a little bit further than what we did this time. Of course, in a technical sense, it's Age Concern's fault they didn't get their application, and they've said that, no question. But it's our fault that we didn't notice that in time to make sure something happened, because quite clearly they were intending to do so, and they needed to do so, and that was known, and we should have made sure that it happened. And I think that's the part of being good community development organisations, that you do make sure that those things happen, that the people don't slip through the cracks. And I've seen this council go from an organisation with a very active and proactive community development wing in previous years to one that's become quite technical and bureaucratic, and the more you do that, the more it's going to be harder at times for the community to fit in within that, with the mode that we've set up here. So the last few handfuls of people we've got working in that area need to make extra efforts. We've cut most of them, but there are still a few left, and I think that the management need to make sure they've got enough support and enough knowledge and enough training to see that this sort of thing doesn't happen in future. Just mentioning Surf Lifesaving, because it was mentioned by the General Manager before, they are totally correct in that in the past, the way that they have received money is by making a submission to either our annual plan or our 10-year plan process, and we have then made a decision of how much, of what the quantum based on that is, and we've had debates every 3 years, and it used to be every year in earlier days on that. We didn't this time because we said we need to get the whole pool of councils together to get a group solution rather than just Hamilton's, us all being played off almost against each other. And so the end result was that they didn't apply to this because they thought some other process had already been started off by themselves, and I think that's our responsibility that we didn't follow that through. So in another sense, our bureaucracy has failed a very important organisation there. I'm not saying they should have got X dollars or Y amount of dollars. I'm saying they should have been, we should have ensured somehow that they and Age Concern were put in the right process at the right time. That's our responsibility to see that happen. It's not just theirs. So I just think that we need to have some checklists when these sorts of things are coming up. You know, do we want to contribute to the people that save the lives of Hamiltonians at the beaches in summer? Do we want to contribute to the organisation that supports and coordinates activities for older people in our city? I think we do. But we can't do that unless we make sure that they are inserted at the right place in these processes. And we've missed a couple here because of the way we've changed doing things. We changed the processes, not them. So we have an extra responsibility when we do that to make sure that people don't fall through the cracks.
Anyone else wish to speak? Councillor King.
Yep, at the last meeting, when this came up, there were members here who did vote against this. It's good, Gordon, that you've assured us their blood has warmed. Amendment could have been put at that stage and it wasn't. These are our senior citizens, our older people. They got it wrong. They said they got it wrong. And we do need to look after these people. They're in partnership with us to run that facility down there. And we do need to ensure that they can continue. Also, I'd just like to flag that this building that they're housed in, that was specifically built for them, that I believe they fundraised for in part, is possibly being coveted for the Ferry Bank redevelopment, turning park and reserves lands down on the Ferry Bank into a partly commercial area to expand the size of our city centre. So just flagging that right now, that we need to look very, very closely at if we are proposing to relocate these people, that the reasons are the right reasons and not reasons because we want what our neighbours got.
Thank you.
Had 3 speakers for. Is there anyone wishing to speak against?
Well, I'd like to speak to it.
We've had 3
No, I'll speak
speakers
for it.
No.
I want to speak for it as on the panel.
Okay, granted.
Thank you. First of all, I'll be obviously supporting the motion, and I think the discussion has been very, very healthy. And the art of having warm blood as against cold blood is with warm blood you have a heart and you actually try and do what you can in the end. Upon reflection, and consideration, to make sure that an organisation that is providing a vital service to our community can carry on providing that vital service, because the negatives, if you like, I think would have been quite considerable. So I think ultimately this is where the council must always retain a degree of, a flexibility as, if you like, as the parent body to any committee. I just want to stress and pay compliment to members of the allocation committee, both single year and multi-year, and people of very high calibre, but who were very crystal clear on the process that they were bound by in terms of maintaining the integrity of that independent process. I also want to acknowledge that staff also had to be part of, if you like, that independent process, and I think, in fairness, while you can send out email alerts and all of that, you do rely on an organisation to read the email and pick up the email alert. But I think one of the things that we can actually do in future, and this is where sort of what I call fine-tuning, is probably do a lot of, maybe, and this is, again, maybe really have a focus on the greater build-up, even, dare I say it, a year out, to say that, this is the timeline, please acknowledge receipt of this timeline. So, and particular organisations that are getting significant multi-year grants, their whole management process, their governance process is really locked and loaded and focused on that. I have to say, if I can, and I think it's really healthy that Councillor King asks the questions. I think it's healthy Councillor King waves a big flag above the Age Concern building. He's right. It was a senior citizen centre. There was a lot of fundraising, and he's right in terms of the flag he's putting on that building right now in terms of any development that may go around it. But that building has a very unique role in the history of this city. The other thing, though, I think, if you look at the overall allocation of funding, and there's been some criticism, I think, from one of the newspaper columnists around, some of the funding in the cultural area. I think the reality disproves that, because I think there's been a really good, if you actually go through the groups and the multi-year contracts, I think there's been, relative to the, the relatively small pot of money, I think there's been a very good, even allocation. And the thing that causes me some concern is one or two groups, particularly in the cultural area, didn't apply. And hopefully, in 3 years' time, I'm suspecting we're going to get a lot more applications. Can I just finish on the interesting points and important points that Councillor McPherson raised around the surf life saving? I know this is an issue, and I just say that I'm not sure if a regional activity such as surf life saving would come through this particular door. And I know there's work being done in the process, because basically this is a situation where Hamilton has a beach. It's located in Raglan. All our people go out there, and I do think that's a bigger issue around the regional funding issue, and on a regional collaboration way. But fair enough that Councillor McPherson has raised it. Just finally, I want to just underscore my strong support and appreciation of our professional officers and members of that panel, who I think conducted themselves in a very highly professional manner. I acknowledge the integrity, particularly of Deanne and Andy, whose professional advice was at variance with this council the other month. That is good. That is healthy. In the circumstances, we called for a report from Lance and the Chief Executive, and I think that the option that's now been presented is in the circumstances, a very good way forward, and I'm cautiously confident it doesn't set an undue precedent.
Thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Young?
Can I speak for the motion now?
Why not? We've exceeded our 3. We're on to number 5 now.
Seems to be no limit.
Now, first of all, I just want to say, as staff in the community development and leisure unit, or our community advisor, even including myself and when I was a staff, we actively communicating with all community organizations out there in the community about funding, not just for council funding, all other funders as well. We constantly contact with them, telling them when is the deadline, what is that for, how much, and everything. So I don't believe this mistake made by Age Concern is somehow contributed by staff. I don't think so. Now, I think the mistake is made, whether it's the manager of Age Concern or it seems to me that the whole trust board need to take some sort of responsibility, because you just can't rely on one person to apply the funding. But anyway, the mistake is made. Now, for council, we do have an older person advisory panel, and we have adopted the older person plan. And so that means option 1 is totally unacceptable, because we need to support our older people in the community. And I believe the funding allocation committee did a good job, and because the panel cannot make decision on something we don't know, because there was no application. And the matter referred back to council to make the decision, because the panel member, we cannot make a decision for the leftover. So option 2 to me is not an option, because that will compromise the whole funding process, and it will set some dispute and any confusion among the community. So to me, option 3 is basically a good outcome. To carry on with the service level agreement plus additional $30,000, and as you say, that will be separate with 2 different purposes. And I think this can help, to have something back to Age Concern so they can carry out with the service they provided to the older people. So I support the motion.
All right. You'd like to speak, Councillor Turman?
I'm a bit confused, actually, whether I'm for or against still at this stage after listening to everybody. Look, I agree with everything that's been said, but at the end of the day, of course, it comes down to a policy which we have got. And the policy we have got, of course, is that you get your application in on time and it'll be considered by the allocation committee. In this case, of course, the allocation committee could not consider it. Where I'm sort of a little bit lost is that there's no guarantee to me that staff actually went and knocked on the door and said, hey, where's this piece of paper? So I see us between a bit of a rock and a hard place on this one, because the floodgates could actually open from persons who didn't put in applications, or maybe persons who were declined, and they might come back and have another go at us. And I think once we start bending our policies, I think we're really going to leave the gate wide open. If we've got a policy, I firmly believe we should be applying that policy. And in this day and age, with social media, and maybe some of the older members down there aren't actually hooked into that sort of system, the electronic age and all these sort of things, whereas a personal approach, I should say, on these sort of people would really, but I've got no guarantee that this happened on this occasion. So therefore, I'm going to have to actually support the motion, unfortunately.
Councillor Forsyth.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to provide some context here. This is it's a one-off, it's not a trend. So there's a group of people, or even one person we don't really know, that's forgotten to put in an application, and they've taken the consequences and blame for that. Seeing as this council likes to point the finger and look for people or bodies to blame, they've actually put their hand up and said, look, we got it wrong. So I don't know whether we actually need to review policies and review this in terms of engagement and all the rest of it. I mean, it's a one-off, and actually I don't think it'll happen again. I think they will have learnt from that. The reason I support this is because we've had the old Age Concern has a service level agreement. I'm less likely to support something like Surf Life Saving. The service level agreement is here with Hamilton City. It's not regional. And I do support the fact that we have a body that we elected, that we signed off as a council to to apportion funds to different groups in the community. And my understanding that this process works really well. And while Councillor Gallagher says we have to have a degree of flexibility, well, actually, I think we also, it's paramount that we have utmost integrity and transparency. The last thing we want is councillors getting involved and trying to sway decisions and have that kind of input. That's not a good governance. We stick to the policy.
Point of order. I hope Councillor Forsyth is not implying that has happened in this case, because that's an issue of integrity.
It absolutely is. Yeah, you're right. I totally agree with you. So, in summing up, I think option 3, although not ideal, deals with the situation, and as Councillor Toomans suggested, it could potentially open the door for a whole number of other organisations that didn't put in their application for whatever reason. They forgot, didn't know, whatever excuse they have. But I'm hoping that this one-off with a revised SLA and way of dealing and administering these funds will be the way forward.
Thank you. Yeah, are there any other speakers before I ask the Deputy Mayor if he wishes to exercise his right of reply? Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Look, I sense there is a mood around the table of doing what's right, and I hope I am right. But look, I would like to use my opportunity under right of reply just to provide some commentary around surf lifesaving. Over the years, they've had to go to the individual...
Just a point of order.
Yep.
This is totally off the agenda. You're bringing a totally new item to the table.
It was actually raised by the General Manager, Gary, during the course of his report, before any of us raised it, when he was asked if there were any other groups in relation to the precedent issue.
Well, I don't know how that speaks to the agenda item.
Yeah, I mean, I think that will be the subject of a separate report, won't it, the surf life saving, and I just wonder whether we're being a little speculative here in terms of what the reasons were behind what happened with, I mean, we're guessing what happened with surf life saving.
But point of order before you finally rule. I think if the General Manager has raised this as an issue or as an item of information, I think it's quite legitimate for the mover of the motion to make passing comment to clarify some points. That's, I mean, I'm not wanting to advise you at all, Mr. Chair.
No.
Well, I'm happy if it's only a passing comment. So if we can,
we've got a lawyer at the back
if we can keep.
We've got a lawyer at the
could
back
have
of the
debate
room
over
who's
it.
costing us $100 an hour, and he's not earning
Can we
anything
just
at the
have a
moment.
very quick comment on this, because I suspect that there are matters that we do not have facts on around the surf life saving, and to make comments now are purely speculative around not having the facts there in respect to their application, if indeed there was one.
Yes, thanks for your ruling. I was only really responding to the fact that several people had mentioned surf lifesaving. They've had a frustration over the years that they've had to go to 7 or 8 individual councils, and they asked me how could they get in front of the mayoral forum because some councils refused to give them time to make their presentation. So they finally got in front of the mayoral forum, made their presentation on why there should be a kind of an agreement over regional funding, and then ultimately submitted an application to the Waikato Regional Council for trying to fund their entire Waikato Coromandel operation through a targeted rate, which would have simplified the whole process. That got turned down. So I'm not aware, I have no knowledge of whether they submitted an electronic application. I'd be very surprised if they didn't, but it's just a concern I wanted to allude to, because We do have beaches, not just Raglan, but very many people from our area in Whangamata, Waihi even, Chair.
Hopi.
Hopi,
Hopi.
perhaps.
Gold
And
Coast.
Whakatane. So I just wanted to get that clarity on the floor, and we should follow that up to make sure that they aren't left out in the surf.
I think my
Hang
rugby
on,
club,
hang on,
Helen
no, hang
Old
on,
Boys,
hang on.
forgot to get a submission in,
hang
so
on,
I'd like to
we've-
put that on the table
The
now.
debate is now concluded.
It's a
We've had the
long-standing
right,
rugby club.
we've
We've
had the right of
fundraised to
response.
build it. We want some money.
Order. We'll now go to the vote.
Move the motion.
Just with your leave, I'd like to add one further comment.
No, I think we've considered this
I
and
could just carry on talking like Gary Miller.
Yeah.
Let's Councillor Mallett did.
Help yourself.
okay. So the motion is item 11 on page 177. Deputy Mayor Chesterman moved. Councillor Forsyth seconded. We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.